We've now got Tasha Mellins Cohen from Counter. She's online, and I'll just give you a brief introduction. She's the project director of Counter, and she's also the founder of Mellins Cohen Consulting. She joined the scholarly publishing industry in 2001, so she's got a lot of experience, and she's held various roles in learned societies as well as commercial publishers across operations, technology, editorial, and executive functions. In 2020, she launched Mellins Cohen Consulting in response to requests for help in developing and implementing learned society appropriate open access business models. Then from 2022, she took over the running of Counter. I think those of you that attended one of our last conferences met Lorraine Estelle, who was the previous project director, and now we've got Tasha. And I must say, from my point of view, Tasha's been wonderfully helpful with everything to do with usage statistics. So without further ado, I'm going to pass you over to Tasha.
Thank you very much. I hope you can all hear me. I'm going to go with yes unless somebody shouts.
Yes.
So today I am not going to give you a presentation. I am going to spend some time walking you through how to practically work with counter reports. So that's going to cover what you will find in our reports, why I always tell you not to use the standard views, what the critical metrics are for journals and books and databases, and of course, how that applies to open access, how you can use filters to approximate a standard view if you want to do so, and pivot tables. And then I can answer some questions about what if you want to use Google Sheets. The short answer for that is it's fine. It works exactly the same way. What I will say at this point is please stop me at any point and ask me a question. I have designed this to be interruptible, so please do just shout if you have questions for me at any point. So without further ado, what are the different counter reports? So hopefully you should all know that we have 4 counter reports. That's the platform report, the title report, the database report, and the item report. The platform report is quite high level. It has everything you need to know about all of the different data types on a particular platform. And it does look very, very boring like this. But it doesn't go into a huge amount of detail. If you want detail for a database, you would want, unsurprisingly, the database report. And this will tell you for each database on a platform. So for example, if you're looking at an EBSCO report and they have multiple databases on the EBSCO platform, each database will have its own set of records in the database report. If you're interested in a book or a journal, or indeed a patent or a conference proceeding, you will want the title report. And again, each title on the platform will have its own record in the title report. And if you want all the detail down to the level of a specific article or a specific data set or anything like that, you want the item report, which is incredibly, incredibly, incredibly long and all the way over here. So you'll see this one, if you go down into our sample reports for counter release 5.1, there's 275 rows in our item report, which is really quite a lot longer than our previous samples. But let's think about the title report for a moment. In this, what you will see is for each title, you've also got publisher details, platform information, DOIs, ISBNs, and all the rest of it. One of the questions that I get asked very, very frequently is, Why do I need the title report instead of, for example, the TRB one? What you will see in a title report is everything that can be aggregated to a title. So that's book chapters rolled up to the level of a book, conference proceedings rolled up to the level of the conference, journals, newspapers, reference works, theses, they're all in the title report. If I was to look just at the TRB1, book requests controlled, you see how much shorter this is. I've literally got 4 lines in here just showing books and reference works. And you'll see it's also only showing 2 metrics. If we were to say we're going to look at the title report, but we're only interested in books and reference works, just because I don't know if everybody knows how to use a filter. If you need to filter a report, you highlight the row that you want to filter, go to sort and filter and click the filter button. And you'll see these little down arrows pop up here. I am going to now unselect the things that I'm not interested in. So I only want to see books and reference works in here. And suddenly I've still got a big chunk of data in this report compared with the TRB1, which, as I've said, it's only got 2 metrics. So what are these metrics that I can see in my title report? So you've got limit exceeded and no license. Those are turnaways. Limit exceeded is what happens if you have a concurrency cap and you've got, say, 15 people can use the resource at any given time, and the 16th person has come in. That will trigger a limit exceeded. Whereas no license is simply you do not have a subscription to this content. You've also got total item investigations and total item requests, as well as unique item investigations and requests, and finally, unique title investigations and requests. So let's start with what is an item versus a title. So in the context of a book, an item would be, for example, a book segment. So that might be a chapter, it might be a section, it might be whatever the publisher has chosen to slice that book up as. We just use the generic term book segment. Each item is counted separately because we need to know, as librarians, we need to know if 16 chapters have been used out of a 30 chapter book, we need to know it's 16 chapters. So that's counted as a single item. The title, by contrast, is the book itself. The next thing we need to understand is what is an investigation and what is a request. So when somebody is looking at metadata about an item, so in the context of a book section, a book segment, that could be the page that has the title and the abstract and the authors for the book segment. That would be an investigation. Somebody going through and reading the full text or downloading the full text of that book section, so that might be in HTML format, in PDF, in EPUB, whatever the format is, that interaction with the full text of the book segment is counted as a request. And then we have the difference between total and unique. So we know, because librarians have told us very clearly, that they want to be able to compare across different publisher platforms clearly and easily. One of the ways that we facilitate that is through this concept of the unique investigations and requests. If you think of, I'm going to jump into journals very temporarily. If you think of a setup that you would have with a traditional journal, where you land on a page that is the HTML rendered version of the journal article, and then the user decides to download the PDF as well, that would be 2 total item requests because they're looking at the full text, but it would be only one unique item request because we're deduplicating that usage of the HTML and the PDF separately. So in the title report, you can see we've got all of these different metrics for books and reference works. But in TRB1, we can only see the total item requests and the unique title requests. So we have lost an enormous amount of information by using the standard view instead of the title report itself. I've just had a message reminding me that I should give you my analogy for what the different metrics mean. With all due thanks to one of the lovely librarians who came to one of our search focus groups last year. She said that she thinks of turnaways, that's no license and limit exceeded, as being somebody being declined entrance to a bar, maybe because they're wearing the wrong clothes. No shirt, no shoes, no service. She then thinks of investigations as being somebody buying a soft drink at the bar, with a request being somebody buying wine or spirits. So they're spending more money, it's worth more as a piece of information. She then explained that search metrics, which you will see in the database report, and let's jump in here briefly. I'm going to refilter. So you'll see we've got searches automated, federated, and regular in this list of metrics in the database report. In her analogy, search metrics are the door count, the number of people who have been allowed into the database, allowed into the bar, and who have made use of the facilities in some way. So hopefully that makes plenty of sense. And again, as you can see, if we're thinking about search, I very quickly filtered my database report to show just the 3 different types of searches and nothing else. But that's going to give me more detail than I will get in the database, the DRD1 database search standard view. So I'm going to pause briefly. Have we any questions about the reports or the standard views or the metrics? I can only see what's going on in the Q&A. Please remember, I'm not, as much as I would love to be in the room with you, I'm not there, and I need the Q&A. As much as I would love to be in the room with you, I'm not there, and I need the Q&A.
But Tasha, you have superpowers. No, there's no questions. Everyone's shaking their heads at the moment.
Excellent. So in which case, I am going to give you a very brief introduction to some of the things that have changed between release 4 and between release 5 and release 5.1, which hopefully you will have seen came out or became live recently. And I'm going to go back into hopefully you will have seen came out. I'm going to go back into the title report.
Tasha, sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
Sorry, can I just quickly interrupt you? Would it be possible just to enlarge? Can you hear me?
Sure.
There's just a request. Would it be possible just to enlarge your screen a little bit so that we with more mature eyes can also see a little bit better, please?
There is no problem with that. Is this better?
Yes, that's much better. Thank you, Tasha.
Okay. I'm going to hide a couple of columns so that we can actually see what is going on.
Yes,
and
thanks.
those of you who don't do this all the time, you highlight the columns across the top, right-click, and hit hide, which this is suddenly deciding it doesn't want to do. There we go. So one of the things that has changed between release 5 and release 5.1, you will have seen here that we've got lots of data types, including conference and reference work, that you may not be familiar with because these are new. One of the reasons that we did this is that we were told by publishers that they were really struggling with the very limited list of data types that were available in Release 5. So, for example, major reference works like encyclopedias have to be classified as books in Release 5, but they may have 5 or 10 or 15,000 book segments. And that makes it very difficult for people to compare usage of a reference work with usage of a traditional monograph or edited volume. So we have added more data types to make it possible for publishers to be more granular and more accurate in their reporting. While we were doing that, we also cleaned up what used to be called section types. So we had section types like chapter within a book. These were introducing a lot of complexity that actually didn't help a great deal because they only really applied in the item report. Within 5.1, we have cleaned that up and made it much more clear how things fit together so that you still have a parent data type and a data type, but there is no third piece of the puzzle. There is no section type anymore. We've also started, we've introduced the concept of item being the unit of reporting. And in this moment, I'm going to jump us into journals instead of books, because this is particularly relevant for open access journals. And again, I'm still in the title report. So I can get all the information that I need about my journals in the same place as I can for my books. I don't need the standard view, the TRJ standard view. So with item being the unit of reporting, what we're saying is that that's got a bit funky. What we're saying is that the article or the book segment or the data set, that is the important piece of the puzzle. We want to know how that is being used. That can be rolled up for books and for reference works into a title level metric, so you can see the use of the whole book. But actually the important thing is how many times the individual item of content is being used. And the reason that's important is because it allows us to compare much more cleanly between open access and controlled content. So you can see here, we've got open, we've got controlled. These are our access types. We're no longer talking about OA Gold because, quite frankly, it is none of Counter's business what the business model is that has made a piece of content open access. As far as we are concerned, if the publisher says that something is open access, then it is open access. We have no capacity for auditing what the business model was or whether it's under a specific Creative Commons license. There are other tools on the market that can do that, and it's really not within the remit of our standard to say we need this to be, open access without author fees and under a CC BY license. That's not our concern. So if we're thinking about a journal report, one of the reasons that you would want to see a journal report is to know what the usage was of controlled content. That's the subscription content that you've paid for, but also the open access content. And that's all well and good. But if you have paid for materials to be made openly available, what you really want to know is not whether that has been heavily used within the bounds of your institutional account. You want to know if that material has been used globally. So again, within 5.1, we have really pushed the idea of the global item report. So this is saying to the institution that has funded the work and to everybody else, this article was made openly available and it has attracted 25,000 unique item requests within the first 6 months of publication, compared with 7,500, I don't know, I'm making up numbers, for a controlled or a subscription piece of content. So we're really pushing for this idea of the global item report within release 5.1 of the Code of Practice. And the reason that I'm raising this is because the people with the power to make those global item reports happen are librarians. You have the option within your negotiations with publishers to say, we want this report. We want this to be available to everybody, or we want this to be available to us. It is important to have it. You know, in terms of Counter, we can push as much as we like, but actually the people with the authority and the drive to make global item reports happen are librarians. So please, if you're interested in that, do get in touch with me. I will talk you through how to pop that into your licenses with publishers. So we've had a quick whip through of the 4 reports, and I've shown you some of the basics of how to filter and facet reports so that you can see the things that you would want to see within, rather than using a standard view. So I'm going to unfilter this now, and I'm going to show you my absolute favorite thing within the bounds of Excel, which is pivot tables. So the first thing that you need to do, what you will see is that any Counter report that you download is in plain text. In order to work with a pivot, you need to make all of your data actual numbers. So you highlight the columns, as you've seen I've done here, that have numbers in. So that's the reporting period total and each month. And instead of text, you set it to be a number. And hopefully that has just worked. No, I've done it the wrong way. See, I do this every day and I still mess it up. So actually what I'm going to do instead is highlight just the cells that contain the information that I need. And because these they're all showing as an error, basically. This is what these little green indicators mean. So I'm just going to convert all of those to be actual numbers, and now we can start putting together our pivot table. So let's say we want to work out what the cost per use is for the journals that you've subscribed to, and you only want to know the cost per use for the controlled content. That's the stuff behind a paywall. You are within the bounds of your title report. You can click anywhere in this title report that isn't the sample, isn't the header. So this information at the top is standardized. It is the header. You're not going to get a useful pivot table out of that. So click anywhere in this data set, go to Insert, and then go to Pivot Table, which is in this top left corner. And it will automatically highlight the entire table, all of the information in here. You will want to put it in a new worksheet. You're not going to be able to see my popover, I'm afraid, but there is a little pop-up that says, do you want to put this into a new worksheet or an existing worksheet? You want it in a new worksheet, otherwise you're just going to get yourself confused. So we can see here, this is the setup for a new pivot table. So I want to know how much I have spent on, well, I want to know how much usage my journals have received. So let's start with, I need to know this is about journals. So I'm going to pull all of my data types down into here. And I want to know what the reporting period total is, because I want to know total usage, not usage month by month. This is not in itself very helpful because this is lots and lots and lots and lots of different metrics. So if I pull these metrics down into the column area, you can see I've suddenly got loads of information going, a reasonable amount of information going all the way across here. Okay, so far so useful. But I still don't know whether this is controlled content or open content. So I'm going to grab my access type and pull this down here underneath data type so it's nested. Now, to me, this is a really unnecessarily complicated piece of table. I only want to know about journals right now. So actually what I could do is put my data type up here as a filter. And then all I need to do is open this out and say, I'm only interested in my journals. And again, this is now a much shorter table. I know some people would prefer to see it going down the screen rather than across the screen. So I'm going to swap these open. So suddenly I've got my limit exceeded, all my different metrics down here. I've got my controlled content versus my open content here. Now, if I know that I want to calculate cost per use, the thing that I would always say for a cost per use calculation that you want to use as your absolute metric of choice is the unique item requests. This is the essential piece of information for a cost per use calculation. You can see there's been a fair amount of turnaways. There's been a lot of investigations and a lot of total item usage. But my unique item usage is 8,090 unique item requests across the entire period that this report covers, which for the sake of our sample, I've set it to be January through December of 2022. Let's assume I have spent $5,000 on this particular journal. I am, please remember, just making up numbers here. I'm going to put in my $5,000 as my cost per use calculation. Actually, let's make this nice and simple so you can actually track it. If I wanted to make this an actual currency number, there's this little button up here, and I'm just going to say this, $5,000. Unique item requests is 8,090. So my cost per use is 5,000 divided by 8,090. It's 62 cents. So this is the simplest way to start using pivot tables to answer your questions. And the reason that I would say to use a pivot table and to use the title report or the database report or whatever it might be, rather than say the TRJ1, is that I know that the TRJ1 is just going to give you, for each journal, your unique item requests. But the standard views cannot be unfiltered. So if you're only ever looking at a standard view, the TRB series is only going to give you books. The TRJ series is only going to give you journals. The title report itself will give you patents, newspapers, all of the other things as well. So you're missing a lot of information if you're not using the full title report. And I'm sorry that I'm banging on about using the counter reports and not the standard views, but I've tracked every question that has come to me since I started as Counters Project Director last year. And just before the UKSG conference in April, I worked out which proportion of them could be answered by please use the counter report, not the standard view. And it was over 50%. So really, truly, if you are struggling to find a piece of information from your counter report, please check the counter report, not the standard view. Have we got questions about pivot tables? or anything else. Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you. Very interesting. I'm trying to understand. I just need a clarification on your pivot table.
Mhm.
You are talking of cost per use
Yeah.
price divided by the unique item request is equal to cost per use.
Yeah.
I just need clarification there because my layman mind thought that it's going to be the cost for that journal and then divide by the unique item request, and then I get the cost per use.
Yeah.
I'm
That's,
I'm
yeah.
just a bit confused there.
Yeah. So apologies if I was unclear. So this is the, say $5,000 is the annual subscription price. Divide the $5,000 by the unique item requests, which is 8,090.
Could you
And that
make
will
it a
get you.
little bit larger?
So your annual subscription is $5,000. The unique item request is 8,090 from our sample report for that particular journal. And then the cost per use is the 62 cents. So 5,000 divided by 8,090. I'm not sure if I've answered your question. Oh. Okay, I'm now not sure if I'm still connected. So hopefully I have answered the question and hopefully you guys can still hear me. Where was I? Oh yeah. Databases. So I'm going to jump into databases briefly, just to talk about the different types of searches. So this is a database report, the standard DR, and you'll see we've got searches automated, searches federated, and searches regular. In the platform report, the PR, you will also see that we have searches platform. So I'm going to apologize at this point. I have been working with Counter since 2015, and it took me until probably 2019 to work out the difference between the different types of search. So we know that these are confusing. Searches platform is the most straightforward of these. It is literally any search activity that happens on a platform, whatever database it's within, whether it's, across specific journals, it is all the search activity for a publisher website or platform. That's really nice and straightforward. Searches automated and searches regular are the ones that get confused all the time. Searches automated are what happens when a particular publisher's platform either only has one database on it, or it has a lot of databases and the user can choose which databases they want to search. Searches regular happens where there are lots of databases on a platform, but the user cannot choose which one to search. So everything is searched by default. Clear as mud, right? It's very confusing to me still. Searches federated are offsite searches. So if you've got a library database or a library portal and your user is searching from your library portal, that would count as searches federated. All the searches have use and value. What I will say is that the sample reports for Counter Release 5.1 are much, much more comprehensive than anything we've had in the past, because we've tried to cover all the bases. You are not ever going to see searches automated and searches regular for a single database. It would not happen. We've put them in as samples, but you would never see both of them on a single database. To be honest, I would be absolutely astonished if you saw every single data type in a single report. It's extremely unlikely to happen. So that's just something to be aware of. You'll only see one or the other searches on your actual reports. The other thing that's new, by the way, is the registry record. That's been introduced for Release 5.1 to make it much easier for librarians to understand whether the report they're looking at is actually a counter report or just something that looks like a counter report. And if it is a counter report and it does include a registry record, you can click through and see the audit status of that platform. So you'll know if they're currently audited and therefore valid counter reports. You guys have been very, very quiet, so I've gone a lot more quickly than I have done in previous iterations of this workshop. So it is, I have built in plenty of time for questions. If you don't have questions, then I guess you get to go to lunch early.
Thank you very much. I have two questions. One about the metadata from the publishers regarding the display in title report. Now, how good are the publishers to code the content correctly that it shows as a patent or a conference or a whatever? And secondly, where does 5.1 now leave the usage consolidation services that only use TRB1 and TRJ1?
Yeah. So I'm going to
Leave
start
them
with the second
behind and
question.
do our own stuff, because the idea is to have manual, to get rid of manual labor.
Yeah. I'm going to start with the second question. We've released 5.1, so it is now visible and live, but we are not requiring compliance until January of 2025, because it is really quite difficult. Having built systems to generate counter reports, it's really quite difficult to do. So we always make sure that we give the publishers a good amount of time to implement the updates before the compliance date is required. So you're not going to be seeing 5.1 reports just yet, but the sample reports for 5.1 are so much more comprehensive than the ones for Release 5 that they're actually much more useful for this workshop. And there's also so much similarity. There is so much overlap. The change is incremental, not revolutionary. So these reports are still very useful, even if you're working on Release 5, the way to work on the reports is the same. So I would very much hope that the systems which have historically been reliant on, for example, TRB2 reports, I'm in touch with everybody that I am aware of that ingests counter reports, and I'm working with them to encourage them to stop using the sample views at the standard views and switch to using the proper reports, so that they have the granularity and the detail that they need, and then they can extract what they want from within that information. In terms of metadata, so deciding whether something is a book or a conference or a journal, that is to an extent up to the publisher. We introduced conference because actually one of the oddest things that I came across was that IEEE conferences on the IEEE platform were being classified as one thing, and on one of the aggregators were being classified as something else, because conferences are neither books nor journals. So people have just been choosing conference allocating conference as book or journal, whatever they fancy, when actually they are their own thing. So data type is kind of up to the publisher to decide. The publisher ID, you'll see here we've got ISNI, because we are recommending that people use standardized identifiers. So that's why you've got the ISNI for the publisher ID. They can choose other there are other identification systems out there, but they would need to specify what the namespace is so you can easily cross-reference that. Similarly, we are recommending that DOIs are provided wherever possible. Similarly, ISBNs, or for journals, ISSNs. We are recommending that those are always made available and that the metadata is correct. We do. All right. So our validation tool, the counter validation tool, we do include things like basic rules for validating ISBN structures. So we can't necessarily build in a lookup to make sure that the ISBN matches what's in the ISBN database, but we do try and make sure that all of the things that we can test are tested. So as with all things, garbage in, garbage out. There's a question from Karina. Why can your suggested pivot table not be made another standard view? So people, the standard views are, when we started building release 5 or thinking about release 5 back in 2016-17, we wanted to find a way to match the old release 4 reports while making it clear that because those reports were very limited, they shouldn't be relied on as the primary source of truth. So we have built those standard views to sort of mimic the old release 4 reports. We would always suggest instead using the main reports, using the counter reports, and manipulating them as you specifically need. If we were to produce a standard view to meet every single need that has been raised to us over the last 5 years, I mean, we put release 5 out in 2017. Compliance was required from January of 2019. Since that 2019 date, I mean, the number of requests we've had of, could we have this as a standard view? Could we have that as a standard view? We'd have, I think, 35 or 36 standard views at this point. And that's not really practical, because every single one of these views has to be built by a publisher, has to be audited separately, and it doesn't necessarily meet the needs of every member of the community. Whereas the main reports, the counter reports, are sufficiently flexible that as long as there are some basic Excel skills in place, you can make it do whatever you need it to do. My goal is very much to balance the needs of libraries to have as much data as possible in an easy fashion for it to be used, with the needs of publishers to be able to actually deliver these reports in a way that they can do consistently and easily and meet the audit standards without introducing a massive burden. Because if we make it too complicated and too onerous, publishers will stop offering this, and that would be bad for everybody. So hopefully that answers that question. I am out of tea.
So thank you so much for giving us this very comprehensive view of Counter 5.1. And now I can wish everyone a delicious lunch, and I hope you have a good lunch too. Sorry you can't be with us.
I will survive. Thank you for inviting me. And yeah, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your conference.